Here we go. We're live again. All right. So let me try sharing that one again, and we'll see if it works this time. And we just posted it on my page. All right, there we go. Let's see what that did. Hopefully, that did some goodness. All right. Anyways, so Becca, how's it going? We got a little bit of a clumsy start to the show, but we're all good. We got non-compliant Mary in the house screaming, and of course, back up Becca, always carrying it up. So we got a new project going on. Yeah, go ahead.
Our newest letter writing campaign.
So when we're talking about a campaign, I want to identify that our website, thsintl.org, is the human solution. It's not about a Facebook page. It's not about some Instagram page, which of course we have those things. But the website itself that's where we operate from as an international organization. And one of the things that we're working on, especially in 2019, where we're, tired of just talking about the problems, tired of talking about the stuff that's wrong, but actually let's get to work. And we have what they call a call to action. And so why don't you tell us about the latest call to action?
I will. I'll give you some highlights on it because I know a lot about Michael's case already, but I did some deeper research and found some interesting stuff. The most disturbing thing was that we all believe he's in prison for 42 years for cannabis, but in reality, when I looked up his record, he actually got 40 years for the antique gun they found. It wasn't actually for the cannabis because they used the multiple repeat offender ruling on him. So actually, he got all that time for the gun, the antique gun that did work that they found in his home. So I thought that was rather interesting. I've been writing an article about him. I'll put it on the website. Separate from that is going to be our letter writing campaign. This one's going to be a little different because instead of us asking you to write letters about that person's personality or personal life or things like that, we're asking you to write to the very new governor. She was just elected. We're asking you to write her and ask, why is he still in prison? And in the campaign outline that I'm going to put out, it'll have some particular points that I would use when writing to the governor, namely which Michigan just passed legal recreational marijuana. So that's a really big point to bring up. They're the only one in the Midwest that's done it so far. He's also the longest serving nonviolent offender in Michigan. He has a perfect prison record. And the last governor, Rick Scott, denied him because he didn't like his nephew. So those are some pretty good points. And I also researched the new governor. And she is on record as saying that she would like to pardon marijuana offenders. So there you go.
So I think it might be important as we're laying out we're going to put together a template of a letter. And I think it might be important to point out that we're aware of the fact that he's in there because of a gun law violation, regardless of how ridiculous it is. But at the core of this is really a marijuana case. And that he wouldn't be in there if they just went into his house and found that broken gun. He would only be in there because of these marijuana charges that he had. And they use, it's a thing I don't know if people realize. And I'm not here to have a debate about gun rights. I feel very strongly about gun rights, but I'm not here to talk about what I feel. The point is that the government has historically used gun laws as a way to weaken the defendant's position. And they do it by what they call as an enhancement, firearms enhancement. They got Chris Williams was facing 99 years because of gun laws, because in Montana, where everybody has guns, he had guns. And because he got charged with federal crime involving cannabis and he had firearms, they were able to enhance his sentence up to over 99 years, which is why he ended up having a deal right there at the end of it. And he ended up getting a good deal, but I think in no small part because we were there at the courtroom in Montana. So it happens a lot. In fact, right now, the federal's position, even though it doesn't recognize medical marijuana, and I know it's in the state of California for sure, but I think it's a federal thing that if you go to register a firearm, if you go to purchase a firearm, and now in California it's even ammunition, you have to fill out an application, and in that application you have to check a box that says that you don't use illegal drugs. And of course in California, I mean in the federal law, which the ATF is absolutely a federal entity, so the gun laws are federal laws. If you say I do not use illegal drugs and you get busted on a pot charge federally, and then they come in and find a gun, that gun is absolutely a separate crime. But not only that, but it can take whatever mandatory minimum that you might have. Like in some cases, you might have over a certain number of plants, or there's a thresholds that they have that say if you did this, then specifically you have this sentence that they claim they can't get around. And if you have a weapon with that, or that they'll say that you lied on an application, they can enhance that. And that's one of the ways that Craig Cecil got a life sentence on a first-time offense, so not because of weapons, but because of conspiracy laws that are similar. They stack all these things together. And there's many cases where people are serving long sentences, life sentences, and in Michael's case, an over 40-year sentence. And it's because of these things. So these gun laws, regardless of what you think about guns, these gun laws attack our personal and basic freedoms and our basic liberties. Regardless, again, of what you think about guns, we have an inherent right to own a firearm, whether it's for target shooting or hunting or home protection, whatever it is. And I'm not here to debate guns, but that simple thing, whether you have a little 22 pea shooter, that little 22 pea shooter would be the same, and it could cause you to have a ridiculously long sentence. And I think that, I don't know, there's not a discussion about that going on. We have, everybody's celebrating that we did it, and yet these laws are still making our position so weak that it's almost very likely that if you're a typical American and you have some sort of a firearm in your household, and you also have any kind of cannabis, it potentially could cause you a heap of trouble. So that's another conversation, I suppose.
That's why I highlighted that, because when I saw that he got the bulk of the sentence was for that damn gun, that a lot of people don't realize that, that's happening, and that's why he's still in prison. He's been there 22 years. The man is 67.
Yeah.
It's time we let him go.
It's absolutely time. And, we've been working with Michael for almost 6 years now. And, Michael was very confident, like 100% confident. Me and Dee Dee Kirkwood had plans a year ago that we were going to go to Michigan and go pick him up because this was a done deal. And instead of it being a done deal, it completely fell apart. And with a new governor that doesn't have the stink on the Flint water deal that the old governor was dealing with, all kinds of political blowback. We had really believed that there was a pretty strong chance that he was going to do the right thing for that reason. But it turned out not to matter. Oh, shit. I just restarted the computer. All right, well, Facebook's dead. Let's get Craig on. This is
You
just.
want me to get her?
It's going to restart.
Prepaid call. You will not be charged for this call. This call is
I was trying to do an update because we hadn't updated it.
an imminent event, a federal prison.
That's all
This
right.
call is being recorded and
Everybody's on
monitored.
YouTube now.
Hang on to decline the call or to accept. Dial 5 now. If you wish to block any future calls,
Craig Cecil, how are you doing today?
Well, hello, Joe, from Terre Haute, Indiana. I think we're about 25 degrees outside, and which is actually good for us about this time of year.
Yikes! I don't know that. It might have gotten 25 degrees here twice in the last 20 years.
Well, like I say, that's good for here. And remember, I'm from a little bit north of here, where below zero isn't unusual in January.
Well, we're actually getting rain out here, which is a good thing. But in California, we have this great cycle that on years where there's not much fire, we don't get any rain. And then years when the fires hit us hard, it pours. And so tonight we're supposed to be getting a big series, the third wave of a storm system. And it's supposed to, if it hits as hard as it could cause some earth to be moving pretty heavily. But, it's the hazard of living where it's always nice.
Here we live in the middle of a cornfield, but the only news going on here at the prison is today is the first day that officially missed a paycheck. Due to the government shutdown.
Oh, so the inmates get hit in this government shutdown.
Well, the inmates, we don't get a paycheck.
Right.
We get a little stipend every month, but the officers get paid on the 31st and the 15th. So today they officially missed their first paycheck, and some of them are pretty distraught about it. I guess they don't have any money in reserve, even though they're paid fairly well. But I'd say most of them are paid in the 70s or 80s, and but some of them are pretty distraught. Most of them are okay and just kind of roll with it.
I find it interesting. I can't think that would be a good thing for you guys to have the guards be in any worse of a mood than they generally are. And I couldn't imagine that coming to work and not getting paid for it would cause the best moods. Have you noticed any kind of a change in their demeanor, or is everybody just sort of doing their thing?
Most of them are okay. The ones that are angry or distraught, including their union, which has been making a bunch of waves in the news lately, what they're mainly angry about is some federal employees are, essential, some are non-essential. And we see that right here at the prison. Of course, the people that are the actual guards in the cell blocks, they're essential. But the people that work in the motor pool, they get paid the same and everything, and they're also employed by the Bureau of Prisons. They're non-essential, so they're sitting at home. Well, that makes the essential people angry, because when the government comes back, they're all going to get paid their back wages and all that on the same day. But yet the motor pool people got to sit home and they had to come to work. So that's what they're angry about. Sadly, they're angry about getting exactly the deal they bargained for, that they put in this much work for this much pay. But they're mad that the others, are sitting at home and they'll get the same pay.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to be entirely fair, but you know what they all say about that. It's funny. We were just talking about the gun laws and how there's a lot of people in prison right now with sentences that are way beyond what makes any kind of a sense because of gun laws. And we were talking in particular about a state prisoner in Michigan by the name of Michael Thompson. And all right, the live feed's back up on Facebook, everybody. So hopefully you guys can figure that out. Anyways, Michael's serving a 40+ years term, and he's got 20 years still to go, and he's 67 years old. And officially, Becca did some research on it, and this was a case that had to do with selling. It was a bust on a small amount of pot, a couple of pounds. But when they raided his house, there was a gun that was in his wife's possession that didn't even work. It wasn't a functional weapon, but they were able to use that, because he had previous charges, previous pot charges. So they worked, sort of like a 3 strikes thing on him, and they enhanced it with the weapon that didn't even work. And because of that, they got him a de facto life sentence. And we thought we had him out, but the old governor on his way out the door said no. And so now we're doing a campaign with the new governor, and we're trying to talk some sense into her.
Yeah, it sounds like another one of those unreasonable charges. One of my buddies here at work has no criminal history at all, and he's in his mid-30s. And they were kind of looking for people to, as part of an investigation. So they came to his house, searched it. They found a gun that was legally registered and all that. They took him and tested him, and he turned up positive for marijuana.
This call is from a federal prison.
Well, testing positive for any federally, listed controlled substance made him a prohibited person in possession of a firearm, and he got 3.5 years here in the federal prison for it.
Yeah, we were just talking about that, how the federal gun laws are, it's there's a lot of people that, feel strongly about gun laws one way or the other. And, it's one of the many divisive issues of our nation. But the problem is nobody's really talking about how the government has used these gun laws to really make us vulnerable, and to make it where a guy like that didn't even have any pot. He just happened to have a trace of it in his bloodstream. And because of that, what normally would have been a gun that wouldn't have been a problem, all of a sudden now he's serving a term, and makes no sense whatsoever.
And I mean, who are they really saving? I mean, what are they really doing for the American society? This man never shown himself to be a threat with the gun. And just because your analysis was positive for marijuana didn't even say he was ever high around the gun. I mean, it's really kind of absurd the way that a lot of these laws are, how they exist and how they were applied.
Well, what's interesting, and again, I don't want anybody reading into what I'm saying here, because I'm not saying what I think about guns and rednecks and alcohol, but as it might happen, there's some of the most pro-gun areas in the country, in many cases, are rural areas, places where the inhabitants might be referred to as rednecks, and there's a giant propensity to drink a lot of alcohol in some of these communities, and there's no shortage of events where people get all drunk and get out there and pull out the guns and start blasting away, and yet there's not any evidence of any kind of mandatory minimum, shooting while drunk sort of things. They don't have any kind of that I'm aware of. Maybe they do somewhere, but they certainly don't anywhere I'm aware of have these gigantic enhancements that have a mandatory sentence if you have a firearm and you happen to have been intoxicated sometime recently, with alcohol or even prescription drugs that are oftentimes much more impairing than cannabis might be. Nobody's talking about it, though. It's not a thing.
Well, under federal law, actually being drunk in possession of a firearm is a crime because it's being under the influence of anything makes you a prohibited person, to possess a firearm under federal law.
But you wouldn't get.
Not seen that way.
But you wouldn't get like a mandatory minimum sentence because of that. It is and should be a crime. I mean, you shouldn't be drunk shooting a gun. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not thinking that's a good idea. But what I'm saying is, if you have pot and you get charged with a pot crime and you have a gun, the enhancement that would come on you would be significantly worse than just the charge of, being under the influence while possessing a firearm.
I agree, and I think there is one distinction of if you're stumbling drunk and you have a firearm in your hand, that's obviously a dangerous situation that our laws need to address. But now, if you and I sit around and drink 6 beers in your family room and you had a gun in the gun closet, locked in the gun cabinet, that should not be a crime, but under federal law, it actually is. And to me, that's why people are afraid of more gun laws, because some of them, lead to absurd results like that.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. When I was in Kansas a few years ago, and we were supporting, that case that the guy was facing life in prison on it, what they call the felony murder rule law. And when we were in court, I can remember we were outside protesting, and I saw more people walking around with sidearms, just, holstered. Mostly they were semi-automatic, pistols, and mostly they were neatly tucked away in a holster. But I had to think about that I wonder how many of those people that were walking around the streets of Kansas in a place where cannabis is so illegal. I had a friend of mine, check this out. I had a friend of mine who was driving back from Tennessee. He drove out to Tennessee to collect some money from a guy. And on his way back from Tennessee, he got pulled over in Kansas. And he had a dually pickup truck, and in farming areas that you wouldn't think that would stand out. But that cop pulled him over and took out, he had one of those toolboxes and a diesel fuel, refueling thing in his truck where, you had a little diesel pump and whatnot. And that cop took him out of the car and asked him some questions. He said he had a little bit of pot. He showed him the pot. He said, it's my personal. And, that was it. They took him out and they started shoving cameras down his gas tanks. And they had these little, remote cameras that they were shoving down these long tubes. They said they searched every little corner of his car. The guy had just rebuilt his transmission. So there was, some fresh screws under there. And the guy was just grilling him over this. And the guy had nothing. I mean, they didn't literally physically tear the truck apart, but they shoved a camera up every orifice that truck had. And it ended up letting him go because they didn't find anything. But I just thought to myself, there must just be nothing happening over there. I mean, I couldn't even imagine, the invasive searching with no probable cause. I mean, he showed him. He said, "Yeah, I got a couple of joints worth of pot here." Yep, there. And luckily, they didn't ticket him for the pot. They let him go on that. So they were looking for bigger fish, I suppose.
I know in my personal experience, my pickup truck was searched more diligently than I've ever been searched, crossing back and forth to Mexico or back and forth to Canada. It was searched more diligently when I was crossing the line from Michigan to Indiana by probably about 15 different officers.
Wow.
But they had, like you said, they had mirrors and cameras and lights and, all kinds of stuff. And I mean, I don't have any idea why they even pulled me over in the first place.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. Well, I want you to know that last week after the show, we had a headquarters chapter meeting here at my place. And we had, about 10 people that showed up to the meeting. And we walked through looking up the congressmen, both congressmen, or our congressmen and both senators, And we got out 2 to 3 letters per person to each of the representatives based on the letter that you wrote. And we got that done, in about an hour. Didn't take very long.
Well, thank you, because I think that makes so much sense, and I think it's an easy sell that, like for me personally, with no prior criminal history, had I been convicted of rape, my sentence would be about 33 months, but instead I was convicted of marijuana conspiracy, so my sentence is life. There's something wrong with the laws that lead to a result like that, and it should make perfect sense to our congressman that.
And there goes Craig. So for anybody who's listening right now and doesn't know who Craig is, Craig Cecil is a man who is currently serving a life sentence in federal prison. That means unless we do something dramatic, he's going to die in federal prison for pot. And he didn't have any pot. He was a truck repairman who fixed trucks. And some of the trucks he fixed happened to be smugglers' trucks. And they would go up and do their thing, and they'd tear their trucks apart, and he fixed them. But that's not all he did. He was a truck mechanic. And it just happens that he was helping out this crew and their trucks. And when they busted the crew, everybody ratted on everybody, and Craig got tied into it. And due to our conspiracy laws, Craig ended up with a life sentence as a first-time nonviolent offender. And, I talk about making real change. And, the lack of patience I have for people's little pissing contests and Facebook, wars and all the bullshit that happens. Meanwhile, there's a man like Craig Cecil who's, for all intents and purposes, a really good guy. I've known him for about 6 years, and I can tell you this. If I was locked up in federal prison for life, I don't think I would have nearly as good or focused or positive of an attitude as he has. And I don't know how into helping other inmates I would be, especially when I lost my marriage and my son died while I was in custody. I couldn't even imagine these things. Lost all his property. I mean, just every horrible thing that happened, not to mention being locked up. And Obama's commutations came along and nothing. And here we are now, 2019, and we got a man locked up. Well, not just one man, many men locked up. Life without possibility of parole. That's how it is in federal prison. So, hey, Mike, hopefully you guys can call in and I can hear about your story. We've got Mike and Sarah were up at the Capitol building in Kansas yesterday, and I want to hear about what happened there. So, anyways, I'm going to get back to Becca, and then we have our guest, Hayden Collins, is going to be here. He's sitting on the line waiting right now. And so we're going to continue the conversation about the work to end prohibition. Who's with me? Who's really willing to dig in and work? Because a lot of people want you to like their shit. A lot of people want you to donate to their shit. A lot of people want to bitch and whine and moan about their shit. But when it comes down to actually helping us end prohibition, pretty small list. It's growing. It's growing, and I hope that you can be part of it, part of the A-team. Anyways, we're going to get back to Becca. She's going to finish the conversation about this call to action. Becca, welcome back. I know Craig gets to cut through everybody's line, but you were telling us about this conversation with Michael Thompson, and we're crafting a template on the website. Oh, good. Chris Howell was with you. Awesome. That's a little unity in the community. I love that. Anyways, we were talking about, see, this is what happens. Normally Lisa is sitting next to me with the Facebook feed, and I can't see all the people that are yapping on it. So I get to stay a little more focused, which is difficult enough for me. But today I'm sitting here looking at it. They're all coming up. So I get sidetracked. So anyways, we were talking about the letter that we're going to be writing, and you're going to create a template letter that somebody can literally just copy and paste and put on, address it to the governor. But we can also take and modify it by copying and pasting it. You can keep some portion of it. You can read it and write it in your own words. You can write a totally different letter, but to understand the points that we have. And we're talking about this elevator pitch and having a short period of time to make a very important point. And this is a perfect example of that. You got the governor of Michigan that has the power to pardon and release Michael Thompson at any moment. The governor, this is a state prisoner, the governor could say, now let him out. And he'd be out in 30 minutes. But 20-some years later, he's still sitting there, and this is our chance. So tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are.
I really encourage everybody to write their own letter to make it unique. But if that's not your thing, then please copy and paste. The big thing right now is such a good time because there's a brand new governor. And like I said, she's on record, and I quoted this, and this will be included in the talking points, that since recreational marijuana was passed, that she is, one of the first things she plans on doing in the new year is revisiting offering people pardons and clemencies for marijuana crimes. So this is like the time to do it. We have the best shot at getting Michael out of there right now than we've ever had. So.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and I'm drafting a letter to Michael right now, letting him know about what we're doing, and certainly want to get his input about if there's something specific he has to say. But I think that right now this needs to just come from us. These letters going to the governor. So, Becca, this is something that is really easy for people to participate. You just hop on the website, go to the thsintl.org, and you can click on the call to action, and in a short period of time, exactly what that call to action will be there, and we'll be able to start documenting it. And trust me, anybody gets a response from a public official that you sent a letter to, you send me that letter that you sent them and the response that they got, and there's a nice prize in it for you. So I am more than willing to bribe with whatever THS swag we have, Willow Creek Spring stuff. I will hook you up. You show me one of those, and we will mount it on the wall like a trophy. So definitely, hey, I mean, it's easy. I don't, we got stacks of them here, but people, if you start engaging these people, they say a letter's worth 1,000 phone calls, and a phone call's worth 1,000 thoughts. So for everybody that thinks about something and whines and bitches about it on Facebook or talks among their friends but doesn't do anything, for 1,000 of those, one person will bother to pick up the phone and call the public official that could possibly affect the situation. And for 1,000 of those people that pick up the phone, one of them will write a letter. So the power of a letter. And the thing that people don't realize, and Alan, that's awesome. Thank you so much. The thing that people don't realize is that elected officials will write you back. And the first time they write you back, it's probably going to be a cookie cutter response. But if you write them back a second time and address that cookie cutter response, they'll actually communicate with you. And if you can open up a dialogue with an elected official on their term, and I don't know, I'm not a big fan of email because it's just so disconnected. But to write a handwritten letter, I don't mean even typing it up. I mean, literally hand write a letter. Take your time and write a neat letter. There's something so personal about that. You ever get a handwritten letter and read it? Working with inmates all the time, we get handwritten letters because they most of the time can't type. Sometimes I got a typed letter from Craig and Michael Thompson, but most of the letters we've gotten in the past have been handwritten. It's almost like you're talking to the person, looking at their cursive or their printing. There's something just really personal about that, and it's a thing that's almost lost. I don't think most high school graduates today can even write. To be honest, I don't know that they can spell their name in cursive. You know, I honestly doubt it.
They don't know cursive anymore.
I don't think they even do it. You know, can you sign your name here? What is that? You know, here's my emoji.
Write it now.
Oh my God, ridiculous. But that's the world that we live in now. And so what that means is that the power of that written word is huge. So we're all walking around with loaded elephant guns of information and our thoughts and our opinions. And these MFers work for us. They work for us. That's their job, is to represent us. You know, I don't know if you guys get it, but that word representative, look it up. They're supposed to listen to their constituents and cause policy to change. And so, you know, it's just one of those things. If we speak to them in a personal and real way and make a connection with them, you'd be surprised. You know, lobbyists, people don't, oh yeah, I'm a lobbyist, whatever. You know what you do? You're just where they are. That's all a lobbyist is. You're where they are. So you get to actually have direct communication with them easily. That's the only thing a lobbyist has on us. And you get usually they give away stuff so that they get their attention. But short of that, we're all lobbyists if we want to be. You want to lobby somebody, get in touch with them, talk to them, tell them what you think. And this is something that I couldn't think of something more important. There's a man who's been locked up for more than 20 years for the so-called crime of selling a plant and having a gun in his house. What the hell are we doing here, folks? Yeah, how come? How come this is happening? Anyways, and I'm laughing, but it's not funny at all. It's actually pathetic and sad. And while we're sitting here, you know, politically crippled because everybody hates each other so much and is unwilling to come to terms in any way to actually get something done. So much so that we got a government shut down. Yeah, they do need to be reminded that they work for us, but we got to be effective about it. If you go around yelling at them, you work for me, they just shut you off. But why not open up a real dialogue? Why not actually have a conversation that says, hey, listen, I'm a legitimate concerned citizen. I'm a voter. I represent people like me. And here's what I think. You know, if you come at it in a point of view that is, you know, be smarter than them. You can be militant and eloquent at the same time. You can be angry and effective at the same time. You can be inspired and thoughtful at the same time. You don't have to be a buffoon just because you're pissed off. And I think that so many times the ones that are angry enough to do something are just, they stand out as, oh, there goes another one. Look at him, you know, and it doesn't have to be that way. You know, you look at some of the leaders, some of the people that, you know, Becca, I'm still listening to that People's History of America, a powerful book. We're up to the Vietnam War now. And through this book, through this story of history told from the people's perspective, there's a few strong leaders, a few strong people that were effective enough to cause some change, you know, and yeah, classy, not trashy. We don't have to be destructive to be effective, and I completely agree with that. So, you know, where's the next one? Probably somebody that's listening here, or somebody that's talking on a show or being part of this. You know, the next leader. We're all leaders if we're willing to get up and talk and willing to get up and move and do something and share with somebody else what we're doing. We're being leaders, and that's what we need. We need more leaders, and we need more people willing to take action, and it needs to go viral. So, Becca, thank you so much. I appreciate this, and I'm looking forward, you know, to watching this one go. Hopefully, this one will take off and go viral, and we'll continue promoting Craig's letter. And you know, this is stuff that anybody can do from wherever you are, and I think that's the most important thing. You can be crippled, you can be busy, you can be you know, computer illiterate, and you can still do this. And it's simple enough that if you can't figure it out, your kid probably can. And let's do it, folks. Let's get her done. All right, Becca, anything else you want to throw into the mix?
No, just do it. Just do it. Like you said, just do it. Act.
I love it.
Yeah, remind them of who Michael is.
Exactly. We gotta let everybody learn about Michael's case and get out there and do something about it. So, all right. Thanks so much, Becca. I look forward to talking to you tomorrow. All right. We've got Hayden Collins up next. And then we got Mike and Sarah, our chapter coordinators from Kansas. And they just came back from a trip to the Capitol. And they, you know, the Kansas team is growing. It makes me happy to see the Kansas team grow and gathering some steam and getting up there and talking to us. I can't wait to hear about this. So, all right, Hayden Collins. Hayden Collins, I don't know Hayden. This is my first time talking, but Hayden, welcome to the show. I understand you're new to the Coffee Party Radio Network.
Yes, indeed. Got hooked up on this. So we have our kickoff officially this weekend, but the show has basically been effective for almost a decade.
Excellent.
Rotated in from iHeartRadio, and here we are.
Well, fantastic. You got a nice radio voice. I like it. So why don't you tell us about your show, The Intelligence Syndicate?
Well, and this is the interesting thing and how it kicks off. We're part of the university network system when the university network was up and running, and that grant program ran out. So what we did is we approached each one of the universities and talked to their groups and said, guys, if you want to be on the show, we'll provide an internship. And we provided an internship for each one of them. So we had 14 universities on the air at one time. But for each student, they have the opportunity to gain something and put something on their resume besides the fact they went to school. So there was marketing opportunities, on-air personality opportunities, quality, writing, producing. And then we travel from each one of the universities and do roundtables live at each one of the universities. So it's been an interesting trek. We have a lot of fun. We haven't been kicked off of a university yet.
Well, then you're failing miserably. Hell, if I got out there, that'd be my goal. Kick my ass out of here. Let me know that I'm getting something done. No, I'm just messing with you. Anyways, so that must be...
Well, we take more of an educational approach to matters. I'll give you a wonderful example. I will not mention the university, but we were in California after the election. One of the roundtables, we had two libertarians up there, two Democrats, one Republican, a Green Party individual, and we're all on stage together talking about issues. And then we open up the floor at the end of the roundtable for comments from the audience and questions. This doctorate student who's working medical, very intelligent individual, very hard pressed for his work, trying to cure cancer or something, I'm sure, got up and said, you know what, I'm very upset about this election. I've never been involved in politics, but I'm going to get involved now, and I'm going to get more people to vote in California so next time we win. And the kid next to me, I grabbed his hand and stopped him from making a comment. I said, hold on. I said, you do know the Electoral College doesn't work that way. And he goes, no, that's okay. I'm a Stanford graduate.
Oh, geez. Wow.
He had no clue. Because his focus is medical.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they have general ed that's supposed to go in part of that, aren't they? I mean, isn't there still government classes and basic civics?
No. Not at a graduate student level. You specifically focus in your field of study, and usually you find yourself doing doctoral programs like at Argonne National Labs doing advanced photon study source.
Yeah, because
there's Argonne National Lab, there's Brookhaven National Labs, and each one of the universities have their federal grants to do research to support those labs.
So but you had to take general ed to get to that place. I mean, I can understand the focused education for a specialist degree. And yeah, I mean, in order to get to that level of study, you gotta be pretty narrow in your focus. But to get to that place, you're making a basic assumption that you get out of a 4-year college, you should have a general understanding of how the world works, I would think.
I would think as well. But the first 2 years of college are usually your 101 courses and 102 courses, especially for your bachelor's programs. So you would expect this would come from high school. Since 1979, we've seen the United States high school program drop from number 1 in the world to number 17 because the competition in the United States has stopped. They've all tried to put it under, I'll use the name Common Core, although it's not. It's gone through several revelations. Every time there's a new funding mechanism, they have a new name for it, Race to the Top, whatever.
Right,
So
yeah.
every time that happens, we do it. Now, I'm in the middle of my doctorate program right now, and part of my doctorate program is I have to teach with high school students and work with them. To give you a perfect example, if you open up your kid's history book to the Mayflower, it's one paragraph.
Wow.
They talk about the Mayflower Compact being the first attempt at socialism in the United States. That's what it was. And for those of you that don't know what this is, we won't go into detail. I'll allow you to look it up. But it was the very first attempt at socialism in the United States, and the way it worked, half of them died, and if it wasn't for foreign aid, the other half would have died before anybody got back to England.
Yeah, there's a lot of history that never quite made it to the history books. It's an interesting paradigm if you look at multiple sources of history and you look at historical documents and then you look at what is printed in the textbooks. It's interesting how certain things are dramatically highlighted and other things are glossed right on over.
Oh, it is, and that's part of the intelligence syndicate. We bring things out of history and bring it back to match current events. What we were talking about, we were actually discussing this with a group of individuals who swore up and down that socialism would work inside the United States. We just have to try it. It's never been tried before, and we effectively showed them that it had been tried before. And what happened when they had all of the available resources to them? And it was green.
Yeah, there's, and I would like to come onto your show and listen to some of the more political conversations. I try to keep politics out of this show as much as I can because we have a focus of civil rights and today in today's political climate, I think it's as dysfunctional as it's ever been. I made a comment earlier in the week about it was just 20 years ago our budget was balanced. And now look at us. We're trillions of dollars in debt and the government shut down. And everybody's pissing on each other because of their political spectrum bent. And it's as much of an impasse as it's ever been. And, people are voting because they're pissed off and I'm curious to see how this next election cycle runs. I'm suspecting and kind of hoping there's going to be 50 to 100 candidates for each party running, but we'll see what happens.
Oh boy. Okay, let me bite my tongue and help you with this one. I don't know what state you're in, but you have a lot of people listening from different states.
Yes.
So I'll take it and we'll have some fun with this.
Oh yeah.
I'll use Georgia as an example. Now, 80% of the people in Georgia are not allowed to vote.
And that's special.
Now, let me walk you through this. I'll walk you through it.
Sure.
You have to declare a party in order to vote. If you don't declare a party, you can't vote in the state of Georgia. All elections in the state of Georgia are decided in primaries. Very few of them, the governor's races last time, was actually decided in a general election. So effectively, the average citizen who has the opportunity to vote in the general election, the decision's already made before they get there, and they never had an opportunity to participate in the decision. So the two-party system has isolated itself, so party members select the individual and control that party member regardless of where they go, because only party members are allowed to vote.
Yeah,
in most states, it is like that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I have been an anti two-party system since 1980 was when I got introduced to the I voted for the first time in '84, and from the very beginning, we were super polarized back then too. That was the year Reagan got into office. And
True.
but even then, it seemed like there was some kind of effort to work together on some level, even if it was all bullshit. It was still there was an appearance of cooperation on some level, and
Well, indeed, and I believe it's because they had a common enemy.
of course,
Yeah, as long as they have a common enemy, they will partially work together.
right.
This wouldn't have happened. We would not have a shutdown during the Cold War.
Oh no, yeah, because we got work to do.
Oh no.
yeah.
Right.
You take a war out of it, and I don't know. We don't know what to do, but hate each other. It's like you got to focus it at something.
Indeed.
And I've supported the only political work I ever really did was I supported a libertarian candidate for Congress about four years ago, and he got pummeled by the Democrat in the primary. Their primary. I think it was the top two got to move forward, so he didn't even come close.
Oh, so you're in a jungle primary system.
Yeah.
Okay. You are in a jungle primary system where you vote, right?
Yeah. So he didn't even come close. Okay. And the budget behind the Democrat was 40 times what his was, and he was putting his own money into the Libertarian Party didn't have any money to give him, so he financed his own campaign and did a lot of grassroots movement, but it was business as usual. The incumbent came in and stomped all over him.
Well, I like what California's doing to modify their voting precincts now. They're talking about a modified jungle. I read about it. I don't know how far it's going to go, if it gets out of committee or not. But the two front runners with the most votes have to be from different parties now. They can't be from the same party.
Well, that gives somebody a chance.
In the state of California, that's going to be revolutionary.
Right. Well, let's see what happens. I am from California. We've done some revolutionary stuff in the past, but it always seems to swing back around to things that don't work so good. But we'll see. Maybe this one will take off. So the theme of your show, generally speaking, is our political conversations.
Indeed, and it's specifically from the youth. It's them presenting their ideas. And we try to attach it to a historical point of view to show everybody, don't panic, we've been through this before. When Madison was president, it was so polarized, the Senate wouldn't even talk to him.
Oh, there's been
a wonderful woman in the world got involved, and I'll let you know, she is so good, she stopped an entire army by herself. Dolly Madison. When Madison was president, they attacked Washington, D.C., and the British were coming to the White House. She prepared an entire meal and then took down all of the portraits of George Washington and everybody else and rolled them up, put them in the cart, and escaped as fast as she possibly could. And the British were so vain, they stopped to enjoy the meal in the White House. And the whole army was stopped for 5 to 7 days, which bought her husband time to reorganize and come back and kick them out.
There we go.
Can you imagine what would have happened if they had the portraits of our founders dragging them through the mud of Washington, D.C.?
Oh, boy. Well,
he is the only individual, buddy, in the world to ever have a seat in the House of Representatives that was appointed. And the entire Washington, D.C. was shut down for her funeral, and black tarps were put everywhere.
Wow.
But keep in mind, the only reason he got the Senate to cooperate with him, have you ever heard of Dolly Madison Sweets?
Sure.
She used to make sweets, and she would invite senators over for conversations, and then the president would just sneak into the room to where they could not escape, and they would be forced to have a conversation with him.
Well,
she manipulated armies, she manipulated the Senate, she manipulated the House, and that hot babe was the strongest first lady we ever had.
Love it. Gotta love it.
And she fought polarism.
Well,
and so we're polarized now. There you go. Same thing.
The good thing is, I think the good thing about all this is as dysfunctional as it is today, the one thing about this nation is it's got the ability to be something totally different tomorrow. And, we have that ability, regardless of whether we use it or ignore it or what, but we have it. And, that's part of the issue that I have. And, the focus of our organization is ending cannabis prohibition right now. We're a civil rights organization, and we support all kinds of civil rights. But right now, cannabis prohibition is just an obvious elephant in the room. And all of the disparity between classes and races and all the problems that have come, that cannabis prohibition has been used as a tool to further these things. It's, since 1937, it's just been this tool. And I just think that it is such a ridiculous concept that a plant that has never hurt anybody, that there's no record of a single person ever dying from it, and yet there's still this war against it. And it's not a war against the plant ever, it never has been, but against the people that want to use it, and against the freedom that this plant actually represents. I mean, consider this. If you're able to grow this plant freely without any additional taxes or regulations or all the BS that even in the legalist places there are, if you could do it without those things, there would be people able to develop medicines that we can't even study this plant, much less really develop serious medicine with it. There would be developments in plastics and fuels and all of the different chemical, we talk about doing things green. This plant has the ability to do virtually most of the things we do with fossil fuels. We could do it with this plant. And yet today, here we are in 2019 in the free world, with quotes on it, and people can and still lose their property, their jobs, their children, and their freedom simply by having and doing things with this plant. So what are your thoughts on prohibition?
Well, I'll let you know right now, they legalized moonshine, which brought my family out of the 30s.
There you go.
So if they could take care of that, I'm sure there are other avenues to release things as possible, because my family definitely benefited from moonshine.
Well, what's interesting.
I was listening to the individual.
What's interesting is historically.
You had on earlier talking about the tubes going down each one of the gas tanks.
Right, absolutely.
If they were looking for drugs in our vehicles, they wouldn't have found it. But if they were looking for moonshine, they better not light a match anywhere near the trucks.
No. Absolutely not. No, I hear you. Well, and that's just it. In alcohol prohibition, people just didn't want to stop drinking, so they didn't. And here we are. They got through it. And in the same situation, people didn't want to stop smoking pot, and then they didn't. But we just haven't put in the effort enough to finish the job. And, it's one of these things that every state has passed a law that the states that have passed laws, every single state that has passed a law has left cannabis a crime. It is allowed for some limited thing to happen, but it still leaves a place for the plant to be a crime. And there's still people locked up in prison, state, federal prison. There's still people serving long terms and even life sentences. And that hasn't changed one bit. And yet there's not this giant outcry. There's not this, if anything, we've lost the wind out of ourselves. People are celebrating victory. And yet the victory that we've gained still allows for this crime to be a crime.
You wonder if you could go back and do a comparison to the amendment that actually got prohibition overturned. And considering that was an actual amendment in a fight, it drew more attention at the federal level instead of just being a law.
Well, I think that's again, there is such a lack of understanding about how our laws work. We have people today that still say, well, the president can just end prohibition. Well, okay, yeah, I guess an executive order could be announced, but at the end of the day, we have a federal law in place that says this thing. It's a very simple Clear law says no, straight up. Sit in federal court and listen to what a federal judge says about it, and it's real simple. 2 letters. No, you can't have it. And all it takes is a law, just like any other law. And could you imagine today a constitutional amendment happening on any reason, for any reason, on any level at all? Could you even imagine that happening today?
Today, probably not. But with the movement they had with the Constitutional Convention that gained weight during the Obama administration, where the states were actually signing on to it, I was looking at that movement, actually thinking that one may redevelop. But as states got a little bit smarter and discovered that if they were to do a new constitutional convention, the way California would kill it is California swore that if they got involved into a constitutional convention, the first thing they would do is take away the First and Second Amendment.
Yeah, well,
that's what their delegates swore to do.
Welcome to.
So that idea died, and the amendments that were going to go forward with that died with that moment. So, even though state conventions, and Georgia was the first one to sign on, California was the second. So there's your conservative state, there's your liberal state, and it died right after that.
Right. And there was a long way to go.
I can see it rising up, and it just depends on which avenue it's going to come from.
I just, the amount of cooperation it would take, the amount of unity it would take to get that kind of a vote to go through. I just, today, I can't even think of what kind of an issue would cross those lines. I mean, but
give it time. You said something before that, when you do your show, you're trying not to listen to current events or anything like that. Consistently all week long. And I'll tell you how bad this is. I didn't even know there was a government shutdown until a week ago. Because it's not on my radar. It's not that important to me. And it doesn't affect my everyday life. But
right.
The press has gone to the point where they didn't even publicize it as much as they did under the Obama administration. It was in your face every day, every hour, this, that, and the other.
Right.
They've toned it back to about 1/4 of what they've done because, this is not good. It's not making one party look good. This is the party we support.
Right.
So, even when you look at that, you see that the press and anybody who pays attention to entertainment news, regardless of the network, notice what I said, entertainment news, they are designed to sell advertisements.
Of course.
These people are designed to get you worked up over anything. This poor Cortez lady, who stumbles through everything, definitely needs to go back to school, but she stumbles through everything. She has become the poster child of selling advertisements. If you put her on there, whatever she says, whatever meme it is, it doesn't matter. She's probably doing it on purpose to make money because every time she's on TV, every network ups their advertising by $50,000. So the people that are getting upset at her are the pharmaceuticals because they used to have cheap ads. Now she's driving up the ads because more people want to hear the next stupid thing she says.
Ask your doctor about Flim Flam.
On the axle.
Right.
As long as you don't follow entertainment news day and night, you should be a pretty healthy American with a healthy understanding of what's going on.
Generally speaking,
they're not contaminating your everyday thoughts.
Yeah, generally speaking, catch a little 20-minute clip, and you'll get the gist of what's happening. Generally speaking.
Yeah, for the whole month.
Right. Exactly. Crazy. Well, when is your show going to be running?
Very surprising. Well, we run it Saturday at noon.
Okay.
The way the university system works, we have to have interns sign up for the roundtable. So every semester we have to restart the roundtable. So if anybody is out there and interested in being an intern and you are college or high school level, I am sorry that once you graduate, I don't want you. You're on your own. But if you're college or high school level, you can email Hayden at haydencollins.org. And, hey, I want to be an intern. I'll send your email to the lead intern, and they'll interview you and do whatever is necessary. But we only do 12 spots a semester because I only have 12 spots available. If you are at a university and you want credit for it, you're going to have to go through a co-op program. But if you want to put something on your resume besides the fact that you went to school, we need one heck of a reference letter. We got people working in Washington, D.C. We have people working for the European Congress that left our show. And we have one individual that's bringing out $120,000 a year working for a news affiliate in Louisville, Kentucky after she left the show.
Wow.
So there is some exposure, but it's not a big show. but what you gain is the experience. So if you're walking into a job interview and, hey, I want to be in production and I want to be, in the news, this, and the other, and you're any snot-nosed kid fresh out of college, well, you're just another snot-nosed kid. You come with a show attached to it, with a reference letter to show, and you show where you've done production, and it's not at a university. You show where you've done honor and personality, and it wasn't at a university. And you were exposed on a nationwide network. It goes a little bit further in the job interview. You have things to talk about. You've done research. You've been forced to learn how to debate on air and sound intelligent without saying every other word or like every other word. And believe me, after you've done this on the air several times, you have no problem speaking in public. So, yeah, the show is for high school and university students. They don't have the history. They don't understand the longevity of problems and the struggles we've had in the United States. That's why we reference history material to current events to show them this has happened before. Don't panic.
Well, I like the way that you're approaching this. I definitely want to catch your show. And like you said, everything's already happened before. This is we have an opportunity. I think today's citizen has more power than we've ever had, and I think that most people use less of it than they've used in a long time. We have the power of information. We have the power to reach people without, imagine what it would have been like to try to get a hold of 10,000 people 150 years ago. How could you do it? You couldn't. It was months worth of work to reach that many people. And today you can do it with a click of a button and a couple of good words. And I think that the art of communicating has fallen apart. I look at people and they're always staring at their little phones and they're typing in shortened, abbreviated sentences. They don't even know how to talk anymore. And to listen to somebody communicate and use actual real words and words beyond the 1 and 2 syllable bangers that we spend most of our time chit-chatting about, talking about things that actually are relevant, and maybe even going so far as to plant the seed of an idea that you can bring to life, that you can actually do something, that you can create a thought, have an objective, have a discussion about it, create a plan, and actually execute a plan and cause some change in the world. That we can do that. And I think a show like yours probably is fertile ground for making that happen.
Thank you. That's the intent. We want to give them an opportunity to discover outside the classroom, get outside of their political bubble. And that's effectively where we push them. The presidential season's coming up, so our show's coming up. Just so you know, the interns that come to the show, we draw names out of a jar. So everybody that announces that they're running for president, each intern will be assigned one. So I may have to take on additional interns, but you have to follow that candidate all the way through the election.
Interesting.
You have to do weekly reports on it.
I like it.
You had to do it on the air. Yeah, so we had a lot of fun with that. And then if your candidate drops out, you have to endorse another candidate.
Keep them moving. Keep them moving.
You know what? We've been right 4 times.
Excellent.
4 presidential elections we've been right.
I like it. So,
it's like, oh my God, look at this.
Your show's going to be aired on the Coffee Party Radio Network at noon. What time zone?
Boy, I hope Eastern time zone.
Okay.
I'm over here in Georgia.
All right. Well, I'm over here in
Saturday,
California, so I don't assume anything. So noon Eastern time. Excellent.
Thank you very much for having me on, brother. Fantastic.
I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to checking on your show. I'll probably call in if you guys do call-ins.
Outstanding.
All right. Thank you so much. Hayden Collins, folks, and his show, The Intelligence Syndicate, noon Eastern time on Saturday. All right, up next, we got Mike and Sarah. Now, Mike and Sarah are chapter coordinators from Kansas, our new chapter, and they have been busy. And yesterday, I got a phone call, and it was exciting because they were on their way to the Capitol building. And Mike and Sarah, why don't you tell us what happened? You there? Mike and Sarah. This happened yesterday, and I'm not sure what caused it. I'm not sure how to fix it. So I'm going to put you back on hold, and I'll try back again. All right, let's try this one more time. Mike and Sarah, can you hear me? All right, I'm going to hang up on you, and then you're going to call back. And hopefully when you call back, it'll get through. So I'm going to hang up on you right now. There we go. Mike and Sarah, please call back. Okay. And let's see what we got. We got Tom Corby. Before Tom Corby comes on, I want to continue this conversation a little bit. I talk about the human solution, and I talk about the cannabis movement, and I talk about things that we've done and things that we can do beyond just the political answer. There's grassroots action that can be done to make change. And historically, there has been grassroots action that has caused change. That ultimately, if the change sticks, it'll create a law. So, as Hayden was talking about, historically speaking, and I've been a student of history, and there's I love to hear that there's always lots of stories that I'm not specifically versed on, and there's so much to know. I just love learning one more tidbit of things that have happened and things that have changed. Anyways, in 1932, our economy was in the shit, and there was all kinds of strikes going on, and the Pennsylvania coal miners were striking, and they decided to hell with it all. We're going to dig our own damn coal. And they did. There was an actual bootleg coal going on in Pennsylvania in 1932. And of course, the law was against it, and people got arrested. They were digging rocks out of the mountains in mountains that weren't theirs to dig. And they were selling it on the Underground Coal Railroad. And you know what happened? Juries wouldn't convict them. And it's so much even so that the local jailers wouldn't even enforce these laws, and they wouldn't hold them. And they weren't able to enforce these laws at the time. If you go back and you look at the history of our labor laws, I don't know how to break it to y'all, but when our Constitution was written, they weren't looking at things the same way we do today. There was not equality. Even though we talked about all men created equal, they didn't necessarily practice what they preached. Slavery was still a thing. Class disparity was huge. There was indentured servitude. There was every kind of class disparity. And so the folks that were writing the Constitution weren't necessarily including everybody in that the way that it was written. But as things have changed, the good thing is it's given us the opportunity to make these changes. And when society decides that something's right or something's wrong, and enough of us get it in our heads that, you know what, that just isn't right. They've overstepped their bounds. Then we exercise our authority. We exercise our power. And that power comes not only in the vote, but it comes in the jury box. And it comes in people that have authority. So there's a time and a place where your local cop might do the right thing if things go bad enough. Think about it. To have a jailer actually say, no, we're not going to lock this guy up. Sorry, we're not buying it. Imagine that. Imagine if that was to happen today because of a cannabis crime. I can imagine it. All right, we're going to try Mike and Sarah again. Let's see if we get them on. You there? Can you hear me? Mike and Sarah. There you are. Excellent. Yeah, we had some weird glitch last week, but I'm glad you're here. So tell us about your adventure at the Capitol.
some marijuana bill information to just about every senator and representative, or at least their secretary that we can get to.
And so,
Quite a few.
who all came with you guys? I understand that it was Ann was there and Chris Howell.
Yeah, and Chris brought a friend of his or another member from out there.
Excellent, excellent. So,
Yeah, there was about 5 of us.
where is Topeka on the map in reference to where you guys are at? You guys are over in Wichita, right?
Yeah, it's about 2.5 hours north of here.
Okay, so that's a good little drive. And how long were you out there?
Oh, we were there for about 4 or 5 hours.
And how many people do you think you actually talked to? I mean, that you engaged?
Every single one of them's door, except for the basement. So we went through 5 floors of representatives and senators and passed out information. And if they weren't in, we talked to their secretary. We actually had a meeting with one senator who's presenting a marijuana bill next week. It's not even finished yet. I mean, but the state of marijuana in Kansas right now, after going to Topeka, bro, and seeing everything and talking to these people, is a shit show.
Imagine that coming out of Kansas where they have shit storms.
Oh man, they're gonna pass a medical marijuana bill.
Okay.
But none of them are really gonna be anywhere near what we want them to be.
But
I think we're gonna have better luck when Trump signs it in and makes it the same as alcohol and tobacco.
so you think that but you think something's gonna pass through this session?
Yeah, definitely in Kansas, something will. It was a pretty friendly environment overall. And last year, Sarah said it was pretty nasty. Like they were shitty, slamming doors in your face.
Really?
And this year they were open, and most of them were like, "Hey, glad to hear it. You know, we look forward to it."
So at least they're on the surface acting like they're friendly to the idea.
Yes.
Well, that's
Well, they're sneakily from medical bill to have their.
Yeah, see, that's when it's coming into all these different bills. You know, like this new guy, the senator that we talked to, I haven't seen the bill, I haven't read it yet, but some of the information that I have on it is basically he's trying to do like a Bradshaw grab, where everything basically has to go through one company owned by somebody. You know what I mean? He's trying to get the money grab. He's trying to control the whole thing.
yeah, that's
And he's got American Shaman people working with him and stuff. And it's like, come on, guys, we see you. Come on, quit playing.
well, that's the elephant in the room. People don't get it. You know, most of these laws that have passed, the support behind them have been big business just trying to get their foot in the door. Everybody sees what's coming at one point, and you know they're just stakeholders trying to. It's just like the gold rush. It's just like the oil rush. It's just like everything. These guys come rolling in, and they're playing cutthroat right now, trying to get their stake in this before it all comes open.
Oh yeah, that's what it's all about right now, man. It's just getting nasty. You know, I mean, out here in Kansas, like we're probably gonna pass the worst marijuana laws that have been passed in all the states.
I don't know. There's been some pretty bad ones that have passed. You got a lot of competition, but if anybody can pass the worst law that would grant a freedom, I'd say Kansas would be the one to do it.
Yeah, Missouri's and Oklahoma's, theirs are all pretty nice.
Yeah.
You have 18 plants, of your own.
Yeah, it blows me away that Oklahoma actually did something somewhat decent. I mean, it still falls short of decriminalizing it, but still, it's more reasonable than most of them. That's for sure. Better than California's.
Yeah, we did actually have a senator tell us, who was a physician, a doctor, who said that she would prefer we just go recreational because she doesn't even want to write prescriptions for people. If they want to choose to go that way, they can just choose to go that way.
Yeah, that's a weird conversation because, you know, no matter what, it's medical whether people acknowledge it or not. And if they use it recreationally, it's still medical. But to have a recommendation for it to be medical, that's the part that's screwy. You know, I mean, you don't have to have a doctor's recommendation to take an aspirin, do you? Or to go, you know, make yourself a pot of chamomile tea or anything like that, even though that's medicinal and recreational. If, you know, it makes you relax a little bit and it's not, you know, curing anything in particular. But I think there's just you know, we have these terms that people have classified, I don't know, in my opinion, poorly. But, you know, it is what it is. So, you know, these conversations that have enough common sense in them usually scares people off or puts people off for sure.
Yeah, she was just saying she would prefer it be like aspirin or ibuprofen or whatever, where you could just go get that if you wanted to.
Absolutely.
What do you think? What do you think about this House Bill 420? What's the human solution doing if Trump makes it just the same as alcohol and tobacco?
Well, we're going to keep it.
Fight for people to get out of jail?
Yeah, at the end of the day, until we live in a place like, okay, so say if it's like tobacco or alcohol, is anybody in prison right now because of tobacco or alcohol, just for possessing it or driving with it or whatever? I mean, I'm not talking about something that actually has a victim. There's plenty of places where somebody could steal pot or you know, cause harm to somebody in an indirect thing that had something to do with pot. I'm talking about the possession, cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, transportation. If it's in such a way that is no longer a crime, and I guess the age thing is always going to be a debate, but the point is if there's a way that you can lose your freedom by having or growing this plant, no matter how much, you know, the problem with tobacco is you can't grow tobacco. You can't grow a commercial crop of tobacco without, you know, some hugely regulated thing. You can't legally grow a tobacco plantation unless you've got ridiculous permits. And alcohol, you know, you can grow your own, you can make your own beer to a point, and I think you can even make some whiskey to a point, but you can't sell it and you can't do anything with it. So I'm not entirely okay with that. It'll be real hard if he passes something like that. I'll tell you what, my job will be a lot harder, because ultimately I just want freedom. I just want this to be a free plant. But I think if they made it like alcohol and tobacco, I'd have a virtually impossible time getting anybody to rally up and say, you know, let's finish the job. I think that'd be the death knell in the movement.
Yeah, the other thing that we did speak to our representatives about was criminal justice reform, and once laws change, making sure we're getting people out of jail who shouldn't have been there in the first place because they didn't commit a crime.
What did they say about that?
And part of me saying all of, they're with that. They believe in that too. The ones that are for it are definitely for Lacey Cruz. Like I said, I had some legislators that we went and spoke to, and they actually repeated what I said to the media. And that's basically, you know, drugs are a mental health issue and not a crime. You know what I mean? I don't care if you want to lay up in your house and do heroin all day long. I mean, that's not my business. That's nobody's business. And the only person you're hurting is yourself. And put people in prison for that is just a mental health thing.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. I mean, if I want to sit there and go home and drink some lye or Drano or dish soap or eat a Tide Pod, whatever, if it's not hurting you, what do you care what I do? You know, if it's not hurting anybody else, it's not causing any harm. I don't have any kids that I'm, you know, putting at risk. I'm just taking care of myself the way I want to. Hey, I think life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness covers that one.
Yeah. Well, out here in Kansas, it's a big deal because our sentencing guidelines for the drug grid is like everything is prison.
Right.
I'm talking about if the lowest bottom felony, there's about 6 boxes that are not prison. Everything else is automatic prison.
Right. Oh, I know. It's an institutional problem. Well, I am very, very proud of you guys, and I'm very pleased that you guys are out there just taking some action. And I hope all the rest of the chapters, learn from this. And even if you live in a state where there is a law that says you can do something, I've got one of the cases we're supporting is in Ohio, where they have a law that says you can do something, and they're fighting for their lives, fighting for their freedom still, even though they were supposedly following this law, and it doesn't matter necessarily. So, I'd say to all the chapters, all the members, all the people that are even thinking about participating in this organization, get out there and do something and listen, watch the people that are, and, we can do what they're doing. It's not that hard. You can show up at your Capitol and you can walk the halls, start knocking on doors. Every single door that's at your Capitol building has somebody that can influence something, and you can influence them. So it seems like a simple solution. The hardest part is getting up there and taking that first step. So I'm just tickled about that. And let's say somebody is in the Kansas area and they decide they want to get more involved. How would they reach you guys?
What? 316. Oh, sorry. 409-9789.
Excellent.
Or you can email us.
I wasn't trying to trick y'all.
No, I was just trying to figure out which contact to use, how much information to give. I wasn't trying to throw the business out there necessarily.
I'm just messing with you. It's just you, me, and 100,000 of our friends.
Federal government. Hi, guys.
Exactly. Awesome. All right. Well, Mike and Sarah, Kansas chapter, very tickled and proud of you guys, and look forward to hearing the next exciting adventure.
Thank you.
Sounds good, Joe. Have a good night.
All right.
Bye,
We'll talk
guys.
soon. All right. We got Bobby Rodrigo up next and Tom Corby behind him. And Bobby Rodrigo, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm good. You got tentacles going on here. It's almost like you International is like the octopus.
We are the
So many
octopus.
wonderful subjects, or maybe wonderful is not the right word, but you're touching so many important subjects. And so I want to rant, if you'll give me a minute, because you cover so many wonderful things. Or, again,
Have at it.
I think this is the right word. So, number one, I want to emphasize to everybody, Human Solutions International is both important and unique in the sense that it is true to a platform that is for the people in a way that rarely you see consistently for so long. And they touched upon in the last few discussions that were going on, they were touching upon subjects that are important, including apathy and being satisfied with situations that really are not helping us. And I want to emphasize that please pay attention to the subjects that are being talked about, because these are truly important. And so that's number one. And number two is, like, for example, you were talking in Kansas, I'm sorry. You guys look at, the Joe and I met in our advocacies. We've been doing this a long time. For whatever reason, we've been doing this personally for a long time. And we met in Kansas. We met because of cannabis. And we also worked on other cases in Kansas. And now, again, we are connected to Kansas. And this is important in the aspect of showing how Brandyville is. I'm joking around a little bit with North Korea thing, but the reason I say it that way is I'm a logistics guy for the Navy. I was an old radar man. So if you look at Kansas Kansas from a satellite, I mean, not Kansas, I'm sorry, North Korea. If you look at North Korea from a satellite, it's like in the middle of Asia. If you look at Kansas, I swear you're going to have to get some people that are running around with a big old flashlight, making it work, and we got to applaud them. And we got to, again, it's another reason why you want to talk about the Human Solution International. I mean, these things, when you highlight these issues, and it's so important. I mean, you're looking at, I was listening to, going to a different tentacle, I was listening to you guys talking about, you know, the sentencing aspects of Kansas and the sentencing aspects federally. I mean, life without parole is not even a sentence federally. It's just life. You know, Joe is understand that Joe is telling you gospel here, okay? So since Reagan. And when the sentencing guidelines were changed under Reagan, they eliminated parole as an option in federal sentencing. It doesn't matter what the crime is. Victimless doesn't matter. It doesn't exist. You make 15 days, you make 5 days, a month in good time for your sentence. And that's if you have a nonviolent crime, for example, which, you know, now violence is victim, so we won't go down that road. So when you talk about people who are going to die in prison, it's gospel. This is, I mean, just go to your Google page, everybody, and type in federal sentencing guidelines, and Ronald Reagan, and he's created this illegal judge panel that doesn't even fall into the Constitution, and they made these sentencing guidelines commission thing, and this was right after Lyndon B. Johnson. We talk about history, again, you were covering history with the wonderful Hayden Collins earlier. So when you talk about party lines, Lyndon B. Johnson, you know, the great president, right? Yeah, okay, whatever. and he created a task force because the civil rights movement properly recognized that judges were sentencing black and minority people and poor people longer sentences than they were sentencing white rich people for the same thing. So what they did was they eliminated discretion from the judges in sentencing, and they created what they call a determinate sentencing guideline, which means that there is no discretion allowed based upon the history of the individual in front of them. They do this, and when they sentence them. So they basically gave all the discretion to the damn prosecutors and the police. They never fixed the problem. They moved the deck chairs. And that's how they did that. And this all happened through Johnson and Nixon, and Reagan implemented these these guidelines and eliminated the parole commission. And basically, for the majority of the decade of the 80s, people who fell under the old guidelines of parole were arguing in court because they were being dissed because they kept being adopted into the new prison. So these people who are in jail federally, like our friend in Terre Haute, for example, are dealing with something where they have no options other than clemency and pardon because of the nature of the laws that were implemented to control us and to keep people in jail. And again, I go back to the Human Solution International being a very important aspect. And I'm not trying to go down a negative road, but it's important that you understand the dynamics that we're in. I want to let everybody know on this show that just today, and again, this goes on a long list, I was actually doing some patent research last week. G Pharmaceuticals has just applied for another patent for THC. Now think about what we're talking about here. Huge pharmaceutical company coming in, and they want to patent something that we all know has worked since, I don't know, 10,000 years ago, maybe 20, I don't know. The science is what, 70, 80 years old that this has been going on? The actual science of cannabis related to just health. I mean, forget the fact that we should be able to use it anyway. And G Pharmaceuticals just applied for another patent of all these patents that have already been issued or they're applied for, and then the ones that the federal government have, they exist, and yet they're going to tell you and me and Joe and you and the national and our whole community and the world over that you cannot do what you've been doing, knowing that you were doing, because some company with some money is going in there to try and lock us out and make that happen, just like they did. So again, you cannot get complacent on the basis of medical laws that come in. It's a step, but that's what the movie. So I think Kansas Korea. If Kansas goes to medical marijuana, it's because G Pharmaceuticals and these other companies go, hey guys, look, we're going to come in and make this. It's going to keep us out of jail, and that's not going to stop all these over-regulations that is going on and stepping on the little man. It's almost like, well, we're going to move the deck chair, so now we won't put you in jail, but we won't let you benefit from this at all, even though you've been the ones that have been getting hurt by it from the whole time. I mean, Joe was facing life in prison for Christ. I mean, and here he is. You know, I know it's the front line when it comes to so many of us on why this is so important to pay attention to as this moves along. I mean, Kansas is, and you know what, I would take all the politicians in Kansas and run them down to Oklahoma, because as far as I'm concerned, Oklahoma has implemented the best cannabis laws, and I don't know what that means. Best laws? I'm not sure. That's like a really best laws. But they have. Where do you go with that? But Oklahoma has implemented, I guess, the laws that are closest to liberty. They have rejected government. They have rejected heavy regulation, and they basically said, and they did it in 5 minutes. So it's like, run those guys down to Oklahoma, run them through some dispensaries, have them sit down and say, look, and make them and push them that way, because if Kansas does it, wow, there's actually hope in the sense that less people are put in jail, because Kansas is North Korea. And I'm sorry to rant away, Joe, but I mean, when I listen to these things, my legal background, and how long I've been fighting this, and I hate what's going on. Of course, it's just as much as you do, and so many other of your listeners and your supporters and your members. And one of the Hayden Collins you had on, and I wasn't there for the whole conversation. Hayden's a personal friend. I was actually press secretary for his congressional attempt to unseat Barry Loudermilk inside the same party, because I'm anti-label, anti-anything. I could care less if I'm a Republican, Democrat. It's all about the person. Hayden was a Republican on that ticket. Sarah Swain was a Democrat. I support him equally. But I'll tell you something about Hayden that is amazing, more than anything else, and I'm sure he didn't talk. His wife, who's also a good friend of mine, they raised or helped raise or help 40 children.
Whoa.
All by themselves. 40 children, people. 40. All kinds of, children of, children who didn't have a problem to children who had the worst problem. They are some of the most amazing people that you'll ever want to meet in your life. And just a quick story about him. So when I was doing the disaster relief that everybody knows about, that knows me, and Joe, and a lot of your followers on the Human Social International. So I was so frustrated because we had people, this was very early in the response to Puerto Rico, and we had people that were just, we couldn't get anything to them. We couldn't get in. The port was tied up. And Hayden is the third in command in the Georgia National Guard. And I don't care if they hear this, because it's a year later and they kiss my butt anyway. So I called Hayden because we work in disaster stuff all the time, and I'm complaining to him. I'm like, hey, and he and Commander Rodrigo arranged for drops in Puerto Rico from the Air National Guard, and that's all I'll say on that fact. Anyway, sorry to take up so much of your time, but I just had to go with it.
No, it's all good. We got just enough time for Tom Corby and a real short story. So, Bobby, always a pleasure, and I'm pleased to have you taking a more active role in the show. And I always like hearing a good rant. That's for damn sure.
All right, you guys take care. Have a great night, and we'll see you next week.
Excellent. Thanks, Bobby. Bobby Rodrigo, folks. Coffee Party Radio Network. He's a host of a number of shows, part of I don't know how many organizations, and also a member of the Human Solution, Bobby Rodrigo. All right. Before we bring up Tom Corby, I want to bring up two topics. One is there's a type of person, and there's a person that will act when the environment's right. And when the civil rights movement was really starting to light up, there was a lot of different approaches to it. Some were militant, violent. Some were, Martin Luther King and, the make change through peace. And there was a group called the Freedom Riders. And I encourage you to look them up. There was some amazing stories of courage. And these were people that just were not going to be changed. And they were willing to put some of these new laws to the test, and they were willing to push some of these new laws into existence. And 5 years ago, almost right now, I think it's about 5 years ago, we got on that bus and we went up to Montana to go help out a guy who was facing 99 years in federal prison. And I just gotten out of jail in 2012 and 2013, into January. We hopped on that bus and we drove. We didn't have money to get there and back. We had gotten some money raised to get there, and we were living hand to mouth, and it was some real grassroots activism going on. And I called it the Journey for Justice. That was the trip, and I said, we're the modern freedom riders, and we're willing to, get out there and do what it takes and push these things. Now, obviously, we were predominantly a bunch of white folks on a bus going up to Montana, so it was in no way the risk and hazard of to our safety and well-being as a bunch of black folks that were going through the South in the 50s. I can't even compare that, but we did have a green bus that was painted the cannabis, and it was obvious that this was a cannabis friendly, somewhat militant group of folks. So we did stick our necks out there a bit. We got pulled over in Oregon, of all places. This was, again, I guess, before they had passed their legalization law. But I just want you guys to look up the Freedom Riders and take a minute and study, or maybe there's a documentary on them, but just study that concept and what's it going to take for us to decide that it's worth it to take a risk, to stick your neck out there, to just do what it takes regardless of what happens, because it needs to be done. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to bring, and I guess I'm going to go a couple minutes long because Corby's going to come on at the end of the show, but a good friend of mine passed away last week, and I just want to honor her for a moment. Her name was Wanda Smith, and Wanda was a unique individual. She, I'm writing my tales, and one version of these tales is the human solution history, and Wanda's gonna represent a whole chapter because she was one of these people that was very unique. She didn't give a damn what anybody thought about anything. She lived out in the desert, off the grid, didn't even have a well. She had truck water in. She was her own person, and she came out to my collective. She had grown some pot and came to me referred by one of our members, and we started talking, and she grew some pot, and it was okay, but she was a good person, and she was reasonable, so we worked together. And then when I went to trial, when I was running my collective, I had over 4,000 patients. And when I got raided and I got shut down, I had people say, "We're going to be there with you. We're going to stand by you no matter what. We're there. Stay there with us. Don't shut down. Fight the fight. We're there for you." By the time my case was done, I believe there was maybe 3 or 4 members of our collective that were still standing by my side. And Wanda was one of them. And when I went to trial, and I was actually sitting on the defense chair for 18 days, Wanda drove out of the desert. And didn't just drive out of the desert. She stopped and picked somebody up, at least one person, out of her way. It wasn't a direct route, but she went way out of her way, picked up this person and drove in and was there at my trial, rallied with the protesters, sat in courtroom, and she was willing, and
60
not only was willing, but she testified on my behalf. And Wanda would have said anything. She would have, if I told her, you know what, just say this, she would have done it, as I would do for anybody. But I told her, just tell the truth, tell them what happened, and she did. And the amount of people that were willing to do that, I can remember when they finally gave me a defense, and I was going around asking people to testify. Most people were afraid. And, there was a handful of people, mostly the volunteers and employees of the place that testified, but even some of them were afraid to really get out there and say what happened, what didn't happen. And then later on, as the Human Solution went on, we had people come and go, and people caused problems, and she always saw things for what they were. And when people would make claims and accusations, she'd always say, well, that's funny. That's not what I noticed. That's not what I saw. And she always was there. And she was like me in a lot of ways. She wasn't one of these people that, live their lives on Facebook and talk about their woes every second of the day. And every little thing has to be, acknowledged. And, oh, I did this and I did that. Look, it's there. She wasn't one of those people, and neither was I. I didn't advertise every time I went and saw her, and we saw each other a lot more than I saw a lot of other people that were a lot closer. Anyways, about 2 weeks ago, we went out. She decided she had kidney failure, and we worked together for a while. I think the cannabis medicine kept her alive for a lot longer, and gave her a quality of life that I don't think she would have had. Her kidneys were shot for years, and I believe cannabis oil helped her out a lot of that. But going to dialysis 2, 3, 4 times a week for so many years, she finally just had enough. And she called me up and said, I'd like to see you because I'm done with the hospital. And me and my wife went out there to see her, and she was already in kind of sad shape. She was swelling up because without your kidneys working, you fill up with fluid, and all those poisons just kind of gather up. And we talked for a little while, and she said, I don't have any regrets. And she said, I'm doing this on my own terms. She goes, I just can't take the pain anymore, and it's just too much. I can't handle it anymore. And it was funny because my wife was there, and she asked if she could have a ribbon. And of course, my wife was wearing a ribbon, and so we took one last picture together. And so if you go to my public figure page and you see that picture of her, that was her last week of life. And she wanted to make it clear that she was, her and I and this organization and freedom in general. She was about liberty. Her and I didn't agree on everything, but neither one of us cared. That's what it's all about. We both have the right to think differently about things, and but we did agree on this, that cannabis is something that shouldn't be restricted or kept from. And I proudly enabled her to have illegal cannabis grows for many years, and I even participated in a couple of them, and we both did that willingly, and it felt good. Anyways, Tom Corby is going to close up the show. We're 5 minutes over time, and Tom's not a man of brevity, but we'll see. Number one, I want to see how Donna's doing. Tom, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thanks, Joe, Mary, Becca, Lisa, and Bobby Rodrigo, Healthy Party Radio Show for another historical show. I'm here at Orville Hospital, room 109, with Donna Corey, she has a severe stroke.
Hey, Donna.
Here, she's improved.
Left side not working well.
Donna, I got to come up and see you. This is unacceptable.
Working on keeping it working.
Good. That's what we need. We need us some Donna.
Yeah. It's hard. It's so like my leg and my hand are stuck. I go to move them and they won't go.
Well, are you improving from where you were at least a little bit?
Yes, if you're improving.
I am, yeah.
Okay, well, that's
Milk here.
the important part.
Therapy and encouragement.
I can't give enough thanks, Frank and Ann, being here for her, and also me for both going through our, yes, of course, yeah. Right, so, we're doing better here, and I want to thank everybody today for another great show, and coming together to end prohibition. No one should go to jail for our sacred plan. And God has always said, don't forget to breathe.
Well, I'm glad to hear you guys are.
I'm still breathing. If people want to know how I am, I'm still above ground and still breathing.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
That's a good place to start. And you're currently out of custody, isn't that right?
Yeah.
That's right. Above ground, not in custody.
I love it. Well, we all got a fighting chance, that's for sure.
That's right. Together we're going to win this.
Exactly.
Together we stand.
Well, you guys just let me know if there's anything else you need. I will make sure that whatever you need, if I have it, you can have it. Don't be shy.
Well, I appreciate that, Joe.
Of course.
Yeah, we appreciate what you're saying to help out.
Anything I can do, you guys. Anything I can do. All right. Well, we're running a little bit long, and so next week I'm going to be in Puerto Rico for a couple of days. So I'm not going to probably be able to do the show. I don't know if I got good internet. I'll give it a shot, but I know that it's been spotty there last time I was there. So I've got a project I'm working on out there, and hopefully, so we may not be here next week, but we'll definitely be there the week after.
You'd say we're probably trying to help rebuild Puerto Rico. That if we can, and they'll do the show before the weekend.
Yeah, I'm going to do it if I can. So that's my goal. So we'll see where we go. All right, everybody. I will see you next week or the week after. And thanks for helping me in Prohibition.
I am Willie Nelson, and the Willie Nelson Tea Party and I endorse the Human Solution, supporting cannabis prisoners because no one should go to jail for a plant. The things I should have said, Tom, you were always on my mind. You were always on my mind.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.